Hello, everyone. I'm Trent Loos. Welcome to Loose Trails and Tales. We take an extended look at the people and the places in rural America that truly make it what it is. Loose Trails and Tales made possible by Superior Livestock Auction. Video sale today on Dish Network, but hey, big news. There's going to be an auction on the country page every other Thursday starting March 2nd. Get details online, superiorlivestock.com. The All-American Beef Battalion continuing to say thank you to our nation's soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guardians. Only with your assistance, make your contribution at stakesfortroops.com. And my favorite destination, well, Ethan Lane, I just like to put my guest on the spot right off the bat. What do you think Trent Loos's favorite destination in the nation is?
Well, gosh, that's a good question. I've got to think that it's somewhere uniquely Western. I don't know, Pendleton for the roundup, or Vegas for the finals. I don't know.
You actually put a lot more thought into that than most people when I put them on the spot, and I'm pretty impressed with how well you did, although it's Medora, North Dakota, on the web, MedoraND.com, because it celebrates a Western heritage and culture still today.
That was my third choice.
Yeah. Well, you could have said Winslow, Arizona, and that wouldn't have been far off either.
That was not my third choice.
Ethan Lane joining us, Executive Director of the Public Lands Council, and this week issued a statement in an open letter that looks a lot like an attack on the Range Allotment Owners Association. First of all, Ethan, for people that are not familiar with yet another organization, Public Lands Council, exactly who are you? Who do you represent? Because it's not you personally.
Right. So the Public Lands Council has been around since 1968. It is the oldest national association that represents specifically and exclusively the rights of ranchers operating with federal grazing permits across the West. So we speak for the approximately 22,000 ranchers who run cattle on BLM and Forest Service, national grasslands, et cetera, across the West, and represent their interests in Washington.
22,000 ranchers still run on federal lands?
Depending on whose estimate you believe, yeah, something in that range, 22 to 25,000.
And because the rumors always fly, the relationship between PLC and NCBA is?
So I am the executive director of the Public Lands Council. I am also the executive director of federal lands for NCBA. So I'm a dual employee. But the Public Lands Council is a totally separate organization. NCBA is an affiliate, just like the American Sheep Industry Association or the Association of National Grasslands. They pay the same amount. They have the same one vote on my board. We rent office space from NCBA in the DC office. And ASI does our accounting. So, our national affiliates that have the ability to help out, make what we do possible by contributing, allowing PLC to leverage their infrastructure. So we rely on ASI and NCBA to do that, so that we can get as much bang for the buck as possible for our ranchers.
Well, my kudos to you if you pulled off how to get two salaries out of a gig. That's a good deal.
One salary, it's just split.
Oh, okay. You get part-time here, part-time there. That way you don't.
Well, but I should look into that. That's a much better.
Well, I'm just looking out for you. Well, I want to also, one other thing. We tend to forget, lest Hank Vogler would hear this, that we still have shepherds, that this is cattle and sheep operations that are out there grazing federal lands.
That's exactly right. And that's why you'll usually hear me say livestock industry instead of cattle industry, because in my role we're speaking for all permittees.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm pretty confident you're not content with me calling this an attack on an association. What's going on with the announcement this week?
We have received a lot of requests from ranchers across the West, from state affiliates, from people who have attended some of Angus's talks. I've attended Angus's talk. I've talked to Angus.
Can I interrupt you a moment, Ethan, for those
Sure.
that are just kind of coming on board? Angus McIntosh, who is a 27-year former employee of the U.S. Forest Service, who's been on this program explaining split estates. I just thought it was important that that people have that background. Okay, go.
So we have received a lot of requests to put out our position on his theory, and I think what you're seeing is a lot of people that hear what Angus has to say, and look, and I've described his presentation this way. It's 95% incredibly useful, great information on the history of grazing in the West. And for any of us that work on these issues, it's really cool stuff. And I enjoy watching it. We have a disagreement over some very specific parts of how he interprets that information and what his claim is to our flexibility as permittees given that information. So it's not an attack. We simply disagree with him on a portion of his theory.
So that 5%, is it strictly the split estate interpretation of the constitutional law that he comes with?
So I'll boil it down even further than that. Angus, and I've had this conversation with Angus. His assertion is that because of the history of grazing laws and rights going all the way back to Spanish land grant, culminating with the Taylor Grazing Act and FLTMA, that because of the way Taylor Grazing Act and FLTMA were written, they respect all valid and existing rights. Ergo, all of those former grazing laws remain in effect. Therefore, if you have a federal grazing permit and you don't like the terms of it, you can cross out what you don't like, initial it, and send it back. And the government will accept that and everyone moves on. We disagree with that. We don't think that the law supports that, and we are concerned that without established case law to support that theory, we could potentially see some ranchers lose their permits. We know there have been some ranchers that have followed this guidance already that have lost permits. We have a situation in Arizona right now where you've got a former permittee suing the current permittee for trespassing on his allotment. That's not good for the industry. It's not good for the stability of ranching in the West. Nothing would make us happier than to further solidify our right to grazing land in the West, but we want case law and we want something that's provable and documented and that we can make sure will stand up in court.
Well, case law is, quite frankly, nothing other than one judge or a jury's interpretation of the Constitution as it was presented. The fact that there's not case law in this regard simply means that there's not been a challenge that received court attention at this level.
Well, and if Angus wants to prove this theory, he should, and this is what we've told him, he should go find a rancher willing to take on that risk and lodge this challenge and go prove it up in court. Because without that, and I understand what you're saying, it's one judge's opinion, and that's fine. But this as well as anybody, we live and die by the three branches of government. We fight for ranchers' rights on Capitol Hill, we fight with the administration, and we fight in the courts. And all three of those vehicles are critically important to protecting our rights. And so it may be one court's opinion, but when it moves up the chain, whether it's through the Ninth Circuit and the albatross that we usually find ourselves in there, or in the Fifth or Sixth Circuit, like we dealt with the WOTUS issue or others, eventually those key issues are going to filter their way up to the Supreme Court or at least the Court of Appeals, and we're going to get some reliable case law one way or another. Mm-hmm. And that does have value, and it is a critical component of battle testing, for lack of a better word, a theory like this.
Well, Hammond's tested it. They challenged the federal government. That didn't work out so well for them. I could go down the list of isolated cases, as well as I do. But the truth of the matter is, it looks to me like that. I mean, when Angus walks through, particularly the rights of the allottee of their allotment, it is a split estate, makes perfect sense to me. And it would appear to me from a public lands council that this is the thing to latch onto and truly be a part of explaining how this is constitutional and goes back to the original allotment assignments to the individual allottees. It seems like to me that it was the perfect avenue to prove our case that we've both been trying to make. Not that I'm on either side, but that everybody's been trying to make sure we don't lose those rights. Is that over simplistic?
No. So I mean, I think that part of what you're saying is true. I mean, our concern is that Angus's assertion goes further than we think the law permits in its current form. And by pursuing a line that is more aggressive than what we think we have the ability to defend, we worry about risking protecting that very important right we do have and that we do know we can defend. So it's really, you're right in that we want the same thing. We're debating strategy here, and we're debating how do you secure what we have. Our concern is that what he's proposing goes beyond what we can defend. And so that's why we keep going back to this idea that, hey, great theory, go get it tested in court, and with some case law in effect, we'll go to bat. That's great. We just don't see that right now.
Well, I find that concerning, Ethan, because to me, I'm going to parallel it to the entire beef sector, recognizing we're not just talking about beef producers, and what was taking place with fat. For years, we knew that fat was an essential nutrient, and that you must have an adequate amount of particularly the type of fat that comes from beef marbling, monounsaturated fat. But we continued to be reluctant to go tell the medical community they're wrong because we're afraid they'd just shut us out and say, well, that's no good. All of a sudden now the science is there abundantly saying, hey, you should eat beef and eat beef fat on a regular basis because it's healthy for you. But we incrementally gave up part of the ranch by not touting all of the merits that the beef consumption gives us. To me, this is the same exact thing, incrementally giving up the fundamental rights guaranteed to us by the Constitution, property rights erosions. We're just saying, sounds like to me we're saying, we'll give you an inch, hoping you don't take a mile.
I mean, look, I lost about 100 pounds a couple years ago eating lean beef. I'll argue the value of beef as a protein source all day long. My wife always tells me somehow I landed in the perfect job for what I want for dinner. But I don't think that arguing the nutritional value of beef and arguing the science behind that is a parallel to arguing what our right is to access to grass in the West. It
is if you're incrementally giving up the ranch. And Ethan, I've got 30 seconds, so I need you to I'll let you summarize it here in 30 seconds. But it's the incrementalism that I'm worried about. We give an inch here, hoping they just leave us alone.
Well, and that is not our strategy at the Public Lands Council. I'm not interested in giving an inch anywhere. What I am interested in doing is defending things I know I can defend and that we know we can defend as an association.
Okay.
We have no intention of attacking anybody. What we did was lay out our position, which happens to disagree with Angus's. I'm happy to explain, as I hope I have today, why we took that position. But we've had a few people kind of reach out and say, "Gosh, why are you attacking this guy who's just trying to help?" Hey, we appreciate that he's doing this work. We just continue to assert that he needs to go prove it up before we start recommending to ranchers that they go down this path, because we're worried that without that court testing, it could result in people losing their ranches, and that is definitely not in our best interest.
We all agree on that note. That's Ethan Lane, Public Land Council. We have much more to discuss here. We'll do it soon. Loose Trails and Tails always. Remember, be gentle, stay firm.